Okay, so have you ever really stopped to think about the rules that run our lives? You know, the laws, our economic systems, all the social norms. Where does that stuff actually come from? Is it all just inevitable? Or did someone somewhere have to dream it all up first? Well, that is the battle for reality we're going to dive into today.
And you know, the economist John Maynard Keynes absolutely hit the nail on the head with this quote. I mean, get this. His whole point is that even the most practical, I don't care about philosophy kind of person is, without even knowing it, basically a puppet for some long-dead economist's ideas. It's wild, right? We're all living inside this invisible framework built by thinkers from the past. So today, let's unpack that hidden power.
All right, so let's get into our first section. And at the very heart of this whole story of ideas is this really influential and, yeah, often pretty controversial economist, Ludwig von Mises. See, for Mises, this wasn't some boring academic exercise. Oh, no. He believed this was, quite literally, the most important question in the world.
So Mises' core belief, he was totally uncompromising on this. He argued that nothing in our society, I'm talking everything from our political systems to the technology we use, it doesn't just happen. It all, and he meant all of it, starts as an idea, as a philosophy in someone's head. So the world we're living in right now, it's a direct result of the thoughts that people had way back when.
And this is where things get, well, really intense. For Mises, the stakes were just insanely high. I mean, this was never about just winning some debate in a university hall. He truly, genuinely believed that if society picked the wrong economic ideas, civilization itself could literally collapse. For him, this was a moral crusade.
Okay, so let's talk about how we can actually find some common ground. Because if ideas are that powerful and we all have different ones, how do we ever agree on anything, right? I mean, people have completely different beliefs about everything. Well, Mises thought he had an answer. He was convinced that even in a world full of disagreement, we could use reason to find a place to start. So what Mises noticed was this. If you try to get everyone to agree on the big metaphysical stuff, you know, the meaning of life, what happens when we die, religion, you're just going to have endless arguments. It's a recipe for conflict. But, and this is what's so interesting, when you bring the conversation back down to earth, to the practical stuff, a whole lot of agreement just appears.
And this is a perfect example of his point. I mean, pretty much everyone can agree on these goals, right? We all want less poverty, we want better health, we want our economy to be stable, we definitely want to avoid society just falling apart. And for Mises, this was the absolute key. Because if we all agree on the destination, then economics stops being about arguing over values. Instead, it becomes the rational roadmap that shows us the best way to get there. The whole debate changes from what we want to how we actually make it happen.
Okay, time for our first big challenge to this idea. Because, of course, not everyone was buying Mises' ideas come first theory. In fact, one of his biggest intellectual rivals had a completely, radically different take on what the real engine of history is.
And here you can see the fundamental clash, laid out side by side. For Mises, it's simple. Ideas lead to society. The idea of political freedom came first, and that's what made capitalism possible. But then you have Karl Marx, who just completely flips it on its head. For him, it's the material forces that shape society, and then the ideas come later. He saw things like new technologies, factories, the raw, brutal reality of the Industrial Revolution. That was the real engine. So in his view, an idea like freedom didn't create capitalism at all. It was just a nice story invented afterwards to justify a system that was already taking over.
This line from Marx just sums it up perfectly, doesn't it? He's basically saying you don't think your way into a new reality. It's the other way around. Your reality, your job, your social class, your day-to-day economic struggles, that is what determines what you're even capable of thinking in the first place. Your beliefs are a product of your existence, not the other way around.
And this led to a really powerful, kind of debate-ending argument. See, if your ideas are just a product of your social class, well then Marxists could just dismiss any economic argument they didn't like as, oh, that's just bourgeois logic. They actually claimed that different classes had entirely different ways of thinking. Mises had a name for this. He called it polylogism, and he thought it was incredibly dangerous because it was basically a way to shut down rational debate completely.
All right, so the next big challenge for Mises' ideas came from a totally different angle. This one wasn't about the engine of history. It was about something even more fundamental. How do we know if any idea is actually true? Like, what even counts as real knowledge? So this really influential group of thinkers came along, called the logical positivists. And they had this super strict test for what could even be considered a meaningful statement. Think of it like a bouncer at a club for ideas. An idea only gets in if it meets one of two conditions.
One, it can be proven with hard data and observation. Or two, it's what they called a tautology, basically a word game, something that's true just by definition, like saying a triangle has 3 sides. If a statement couldn't pass one of those 2 tests, they basically called it literal nonsense.
So you can see how this poses a massive problem, right? Are all truths that don't need experiments just fancy word games? I mean, if you can't test something in a lab, is it meaningless? This called into question the entire foundation of Mises' work. It asks a huge question. Can we actually discover real, useful truths about the world just by using pure logic?
Okay, this comparison here really makes the whole debate super clear. The positivists basically said that any truth you figure out without doing an experiment is like type A. Take the sentence, a bachelor has no wife. Sure, it's true, but it doesn't tell you anything new about reality. It's just defining a word. But Mises fired back, arguing that his economic laws were like type B, like the Pythagorean theorem. You don't need to go out and measure 1,000,000 right-angled triangles to prove it's true. It's a discovery made through pure logic, but it reveals a deep, powerful, and incredibly useful truth about how reality actually works.
And Mises' counter-argument here was honestly pretty brilliant. He said that fundamental economic laws are exactly like the Pythagorean theorem. They're logical deductions that tell us something profound about the world. And he used this great thought experiment. Imagine intelligent aliens show up. They are not going to care one bit about our definition of the word bachelor. That's just a human word game. But the Pythagorean theorem? Oh yeah, they'd recognize that as a universal truth. And, Mises argued, if they started to trade and interact, they'd discover the laws of economics too, as genuine, useful knowledge about how conscious beings make choices.
All right, so we've been deep in this class of some really big ideas. But this is not just some dusty, abstract philosophical debate. Mises was absolutely adamant that this battle, the battle for what we even consider to be true, has serious, real-world, life-and-death consequences. And this might be his most chilling and powerful point of all. When he was writing about the rise of Nazism, Mises argued that you can't just defeat an ideology like that with armies and bombs alone. Because as long as the terrible ideas that created it are still floating around, it can always come back. He said the only way to truly defeat it for good is to take apart the ideology itself, to fight bad ideas with better ideas, to fight them with reason. So at the end of the day, this whole entire debate really boils down to one fundamental question. What is our role in all of this? It's about human agency. Are we just puppets, with our strings being pulled by historical forces and material conditions that are totally beyond our control? Or are we the architects? Can we actually use our reason and our ideas to consciously design and build a better world?
Mises and Marx gave us 2 completely different answers to that question. But the question itself, well, it's as important today as it has ever been. Are our beliefs simply a product of our times, or do our times become a product of our beliefs? How you answer that doesn't just change how you see the past. It changes everything about what you think is possible for the future. Thanks for joining me for this explainer.